if you're hired to come in and support a student, of course you have, an obligation to help and support them, and maybe are less attuned to the needs of the other students for various reasons. And teachers are certainly more, better positioned
Sure.
for those types of considerations. And they have all the other contacts, whether it be social, political, or whatever it is, with all these students that they also have to play around with too. Is that sooner, reduction in behavior, and though it might not be as robust, seem to be preferable based on the patterns of selection of the teachers, which like to me totally makes sense. And in that, you need the fire put out yesterday, and you may not necessarily have the time, resources, bandwidth, or anything else, these other things available to you to be able to like wait it out.
Welcome to another episode of Cooperative Learning. I'm Kyle Steary. I'm your host. With me, as always, is Dr. Steve Sparks. Steve, what's going on? How's it going?
We're here. We're living the dream. The world isn't burning around us. We'll just ignore everything happening and just pretend the world's a happy place. It's all good, man.
Quite the opposite right now. It started just like very uncharacteristically, well, not uncharacteristically given the context. It was like almost a nice spring day, and then suddenly we got hit with like hail and snow, and now it's like a winter wonderland again. So
I was gonna say, just because you're in Indiana, it's probably a problem with Indiana, but I won't offend all the Indiana people out there, just you. So we'll skip that part for now.
The Amish guy in the corner warned me about it. He said the weatherman had it wrong, and he was totally right. So speaking of wise guests, we have one today. He's an associate professor at Michigan State University, recognized as one of the foremost experts in the areas of ethics and professionalism and the practice of applied behavior analysis. He also specializes in restraint and seclusion in public schools, along with choice and social skill development of children with autism. He serves as an associate editor for the Journal of Applied Behavior Analysis, the leading journal in our discipline. He's also received numerous awards, including Outstanding Mentor Award from ABAI and the APBA's Excellence in Ethical Practice Award, in recognition of his contributions to ethical practice in the field of applied behavior analysis. Dr. Matt Brodhead, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here, Kyle. I'm also living the dream, but I'll say this. One time, I remember walking into a gas station and the attendant asked me, how you doing? And I said, man, I'm living the dream. And she looks at me deadpan in the eye and says, your dream is someone else's nightmare. Just don't forget that.
It really put a damper on the day.
Yeah, you can't be living too well. We gotta take you down a notch.
I've never forgotten that. I have a terrible memory, but I don't know how I'm gonna forget that one.
I think my dream is someone else's, just like coffee break. Like my dream is just quiet. I don't need much else than that. So if that's a nightmare, I guess. But well, Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself. A lot of conversation today. We're going to center around this article that you are one of the authors on: delayed discounting and teacher decision making of behavioral interventions. But anything I missed in that introduction? How are things going in East Lansing?
Yeah, things are great in East Lansing. We, the football team hasn't improved much, but we've got Pat Fitzgerald now, so we'll see how that goes. Basketball is coming along real nicely, and I think the college and our program in ABA are really strong. So we have a master's in ABA program here. We do research theses as part of that program, and Cora was a graduate student in that program, one of my advisees, and so she can always speak to what that program is like. But I've just been over the course of my career, I feel like I've experienced some really interesting sort of sea changes in the things that I've been interested in. I always thought of myself as an applied researcher, and as I got thicker and thicker into the weeds, I started to learn more and more about choice and factors that might affect decision making. And then so all of a sudden we've had this string of translational research articles, I know that we're going to talk about here, one of them, and it's been a really interesting journey to try and take what's kind commonly not been explored in an applied context, and try and make it make sense for those applied contexts. So it's been a fun challenge and a great journey.
That's awesome. Yeah, Cora always speaks very highly of her time. It looks like we lost her, so she may or may not be back, but we'll roll with that. And yeah, giving credit to the rest of the authors here of this article before we dig into it. Make sure I say this right: Casarella, Brodhead, Cox, and Sarmiento. Did I say those correctly?
Yep. Allison Cascarilla, David Cox, and Cherish Sarmiento. And Cherish is now an assistant professor at Utah State University. Allison graduated with her PhD here, and she's working locally. And I don't know what David's doing right now. David changes like every 6 months or so, but that's always been what David does. Always impressing me in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, David seems to every 6 months or so let us know, hey, I got something I'm doing. We're like, oh, cool, come on, tell us about it. So he's been our most frequent guest on this podcast so far, I think.
Yeah, he's been our only repeat, and each time I'm like, man, I thought I knew about the world, but I guess I don't. He's so brilliant.
he's got a really level head about it too, which I think is really good, because a lot of people can be really talented in that regard and have a really big ego. But David's always been super humble, and that's one of the things I've always appreciated about him.
Yeah, I've never needed the talent for the ego. It just came naturally. So
no one's disputing that, Steve.
No. Well, speaking of connections, because I know you mentioned supervising Cora, Matt was 2 years ahead of me in the master's program at Western Michigan University. And one time he comes in the lab. I'm still an undergraduate student working my way into the program. He's a second year getting ready to graduate master's student. And I had a horrible migraine. So I have my sunglasses on because the windows are open. I'm trying to get some work done. He just comes in, shakes his head. He's like, all right, Hollywood, and then walks away.
Like I said earlier, I have a terrible memory, but I'm really glad that you shared that with me. And I hate to say it, but it sounds like something I would have done.
At least one of your other classmates knew I had the headache and said, come on now, the sun never sets on a badass, so it's all right, sort of thing.
Yeah.
It became a whole thing that day.
Yeah. That's great. Well, it might have been Cal Gage. I wonder who might have.
It was Joey Norcross, but
okay. Two pieces off of the same loaf.
Well, I'm gonna start calling you Dr. Hollywood. I like that.
Doc Hollywood.
Doc Hollywood. There you go. Yeah, that's a whole other podcast. Well, hey, we're at a time in America where education, not just special education, but kind of the whole system, is facing challenges and barriers. I was just talking to a friend on Sunday who I was just asking how it was going with her classroom, and by the end she was in tears. 35 kids in her classroom, 7 had IEPs, budget cuts, new curricula, I should say, and just significant barriers. And she's not even, in the special education realm. What barriers? What are you seeing out there right now, Matt, as far as teachers out in the field trying to teach? Not even in regards to challenging behavior, but maybe we should talk about challenging behavior. But what barriers are they facing right now? What makes it difficult for teachers? I don't know how else to ask that, but that's kind of my segue.
I think that's a really good question. A lot of the focus of what we talk about in this paper, and what we'll talk about today, is that it's that classroom management piece that I think teachers really struggle with. They struggle with good training in classroom management, and they struggle with good resources and support within the district to be able to assist them with classroom management. So, in a lot of teacher education programs, there really isn't coursework related to classroom management. So, you can teach, subject matter expertise in writing and math. I mean, all of that is really important. Don't get me wrong. But if you can't control your classroom, you're going to have a hard time. And we know that most students with disabilities receive, their FAPE, or their free and appropriate public education, in those general education classrooms anyway. So it's the general ed teachers who who are going to be dealing with most of the students with disabilities in public schools, yet they don't get the training for on that classroom management. I think the other thing, and as a parent of 2 school-aged kids, it has brought tremendous perspective to the work and labor. I think that public school teachers are engaged in. I've got tremendous respect for the work that they do, but you have pressures and angry people coming at them on all sides, and Republican, Democrat, left, right, center, it doesn't matter, what your political affiliation is, they seem to be the whipping post, for just about anything. And it's hard, especially in a situation where there actually is a proper point of advocacy, maybe on the parents' behalf. I think schools are so used to sometimes getting yelled at or told that they're doing things wrong, where it becomes rather insular, and they're not, I think for many good reasons, not listening or taking advice from the outside. Whereas, there are still good supports and advice that are coming from various directions that it could benefit from. So if that answers that question, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, you see it as like kind of twofold. There's kind of like a resource issue and also kind of like a skill issue where, they might not be getting enough training in classroom management, on top of the fact they aren't feeling supported in numerous avenues of their jobs.
Right. And one of the things that the state of Michigan really struggled with for a while is that if you wanted to be a special educator, you had to tack that on with like early childhood education, secondary ed. So there wasn't room in the undergraduate sequence for specific training in classroom management unless you wanted to be at college for 6 years, which I ended up going for 11. So, but like no one wants to do an undergrad degree in 6 when they can get it done in 4. So we had to do some finagling just to get some stuff approved by the state to be able to offer a standalone special ed program for us. And there we have 2 semesters of classroom management. So we had at least create not have it be a one-off, but try to make it a little bit more salient for our students. But they're still going to get out there and need support within the district. So I can't sit here and say with a straight face that will be enough. But I'm really happy with how we were able to adjust that.
Cool. Steve, did you have a question?
No, I was just talking about how the lack of information or the lack of training on some of these things. I always just still go back to the follow through project. The fact that the government funded over 20 years of research on the best way to teach kids. And there's a lot of data out there that I suggest anybody that's not familiar, go check it out. And then both parties, all parties, and everybody just did nothing with it. But hey, you have a new plan, a new way to teach people. I'm not going to say or assume, but I will assume, how about you donate to a campaign and we'll try to see if your program works, sort of thing, is what it kind of seems like, at least from the outside perspective. And so I think it's a issue politically in general, not with one part or the other. Like you're saying that you're funding this data, you had this data, why aren't we looking at it? Why aren't we using it?
Yeah. Which is unfortunate, because it's, our time isn't cheap. I mean, I think as researchers, right.
Yeah.
And doing the work that, that we do. And, I guess as a researcher, you always, gosh, I hope that my work can affect policy. And, we have one of the top special education programs here in the country. And, I'm fortunate, one of my colleagues, Dr. Adria Truckenmiller, she's a literacy writing person. She sits on the governor's literacy council now. So she's doing a good job being able to, support or advise in that capacity. But, it still seems kind of like by trial by fire in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to behavior stuff.
Yeah. There's so much that had it been actually planned out and designed in a logical manner, it could have just worked, and in society as a whole. But we don't need to get into all of that.
Right. No, I get it. And it's a
Well, talking specifically then about classroom management in the paper, you utilized delayed discounting. Anybody who may be unfamiliar with delayed discounting or concurrent choice procedures, things like that, do you want to give like a good like kind of working definition first about what delayed discounting is and how it's like commonly applied?
Yeah. So, I always like to think about it by taking a step back and considering how all behavior, at least, I would argue, would happen in a choice context where there's always at least two response options available to you at any one given point in time, and likely more. And with those choices that we make, there are certain things about those choices that could affect our selections, and one of them being the delay to when I actually receive that reinforcer or the outcome of my choice. And so what delayed discounting essentially says is that the outcome of a reward, or excuse me, the value of reward decreases as a function of delay to receiving that reward. So, the value of a reward might be more to me now than if I were to receive it in, let's say, a week or 30 days, depending on what it was that you're maybe offering up. So it's a good way to sort of measure these sort of real like world type of like scenarios where the outcomes of our decisions don't necessarily occur immediately
Right.
in behavior in that complex context.
It's kind of
go ahead, Steve.
It's more of a scientific exploration into like the marshmallow test, basically, right? The amount of reinforcement on that curve, that responding curve, where does it start to decrease based on how long that delay is, that sort of thing.
Yeah, you can think about it that way, and the marshmallow test is a really sort of like good example to try to like lay that to bear. I always joke that I would always make the impulsive decision and take the marshmallow versus waiting longer and maybe having more, which is why I shouldn't go unsupervised in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Not that I would do anything illicit there. I just want to know. But my wife and I went to go see the Dead & Co. last summer at the Sphere, and I was just like, you just can't leave me alone in the casino because I'm looking for the quick dopamine hit and not thinking about the long term here.
Yeah,
that's me.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I can't do it unless I can find a way to improve my odds personally. You know what I mean? Like if I'm going to the casino, I'm probably only playing poker because I'm playing the other players, not the table.
Right. Or I really like craps. And I'm not sitting here. I'm not trying to endorse gambling, but I've found that there are some good bets on the craps table, and I feel like with the randomness, it's better than playing like a slot machine, right? Yeah. And so
gotcha. Well, and a side note, glad you got to catch Dead & Co. Rest in peace, Bob. Right?
Yeah, that was I look back at it and I'm really glad that we had a chance to go and see that because they were great. If anyone ever has a chance to see a show at the Sphere, it's fantastic. It is 10 times more magnificent than what it looks like online, and it's magnificent online, but the sound is also awesome too. So
no one talks about the sound there. It's always the show, but no one talks about the sound.
Oh, the audio so good. The audio is so good. Yeah. So let it be known. I'd see another show there if I the right app came through.
I heard they're talking about Metallica doing a residency. So
I don't know if I'd see that show, but maybe. I did see Phil Lesh and Friends, and I'll tell you, everything I thought it would be, it wasn't, but it was also just it was just the weirdest night of my life. But we'll just leave it at that.
Maybe you wouldn't want it any other way, though, right?
maybe we'll stick around after the recording ends and we'll tell you some stories. But anyway, getting back to the paper, 2 experiments then using this kind of you kind of sought to answer. Do teachers prefer treatments, and I'm paraphrasing, you let me know if this is right or not, but do teachers prefer treatments that work sooner versus waiting longer and maybe having better results? So like short-term, more immediate results, or waiting longer and having better behavioral outcomes as far as challenging behavior is concerned. And you also asked if demographics might have some sort of correlational relationship with delay curves, delay response curves. Do you want to talk about kind of that first experiment and kind of what you guys found in that first experiment?
So in order to understand the first experiment, you kind of have to take a step back to a previous study that we did where we were just looking to see if we could get teachers to, discount, treatment outcomes. If delayed or treatment outcome, would it all affect how, a person might make selections? And we published that paper in the Journal of Behavioral Education a couple of years prior to this one. And, we found that it did. It had much smaller sample, I think maybe high 20s or low 30s of participants. One of the problems with that, though, is that the task itself, like the choice trials that we had, it took about 47 minutes on average to complete. Like it was just,
okay.
I mean, it was a good first step, but it was just a really long time, and we didn't think that was going to have any, practical value. And we knew that if we wanted to look at this with more participants, we had to decrease the length of the task, right? We had to decrease the response effort to completing it. So Allison, looked into the treatment choice, or excuse me, the monetary choice questionnaire, which is, in delayed discounting is a good assessment and has capital V and capital R validity and reliability measures to demonstrate that somebody's behavior is sensitive to delay. So, what's it, a 27 item survey. So what we did is we modified that into the treatment choice questionnaire and compared responses to both, just to make sure that the treatment choice questionnaire would result in similar effects in choice making as the monetary choice questionnaire. So the first part of that was to see, could we create like an abbreviated version that's asking about treatment outcomes and not money, that we can then use in subsequent studies. And so with that comparison, we found that our participants, generally responded the same way to delays and outcomes for treatment choices than they did to delays in receiving money with the monetary choice questionnaire. So that gave us good confidence that the monetary or the treatment choice questionnaire could then be used again in isolation in the future.
And so an example, do you want to give an example of like what the monetary questionnaire might sound like, and then how that like correlates to what the treatment outcome question might look like?
Yeah, so one choice option might look like, would you prefer $54 today or $55 in 117 days? And so the participant would have an opportunity to select, 54 today or 55 in 117 days. The treatment choice questionnaire would look like, would you prefer a treatment that will result in 54 days without problem behavior immediately, or a treatment that will result in 55 days without problem behavior after 117 days of treatment implementation? So just manipulated the wording there to more so fit that treatment choice context.
Gotcha.
Not to get too theoretical down the rabbit hole with this, but I've been talking to supervisees and some colleagues lately, because there's been so much talk of control and the reinforcing value of control, and where does it fit in as a reinforcer kind of in our idea. Like, we tend to try to break things down to, tangible and attention, those sort of things. And really analyzing it, it makes sense that this would be what you're seeing, kind of how it fits in with that questionnaire the same way as a monetary value, because it seems to me that it functions almost identically as a generalized reinforcer in the same way money does. I mean, you don't have something tangible to exchange, but that control over the situation gets you access to so many other reinforcers that functionality wise, it would be theoretically analogous to one another.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, Steve. And I don't know if I've thought about it in that way. If we did, and maybe we wrote about it, I completely forgot. But I think that that's a really good point, right? There's not just for the teacher one specific thing that, yeah, we all want the kids' challenging behavior to be better because we want to support them. But you think about their learning outcomes are going to improve. The learning outcomes of other students in the classroom are going to improve indirectly as well, because they're not going to be disrupted so much. The teacher's going to have all this additional time now that they can spend dealing with other things as well. So it does kind of, I do see a lot of similarities there. It's an interesting point.
And even conceptually, I'd say the control you have in other environments, in other parts of your lives, the same way money would affect you in any other situation, those control and that reinforcement and those generalized reinforcers at the store or with your own children or with your family members, what have you, would seem to affect the reinforcing value of making a choice in that setting as well. Just something I was thinking about recently, and maybe we'll think about it a little bit more deeply and write about it someday, but just, or not. Maybe I'm too busy or too lazy to do
it. You got your own demand curve, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. There are priorities in your life that sort of force the allocation of your choices in various directions, right?
So you found similarities though between the monetary questionnaire and then also the behavioral outcomes questionnaire, essentially. So, and it basically stated that teachers, at least on this questionnaire, seem to prefer more immediate, like short-term effects versus waiting long-term, like implementing a behavior plan for a long time for potentially even bigger effects.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that sooner, reduction in behavior, and though it might not be as robust, seem to be preferable based on the patterns of selection of the teachers, which like to me totally makes sense. And in that, you need the fire put out yesterday, and you may not necessarily have the time, resources, bandwidth, or anything else, these other things available to you to be able to like wait it out. And we can talk about like why that matters, sort of later for us as behavior analysts. But it's generally not so surprising either.
Yeah, I'll say all the consulting I've done in schools for behavior situations, the one comment when I had trouble getting buy-in always was, well, how am I supposed to do that while I'm teaching the class? And like how the time allocation and figuring it out. And I can't just ignore this. Other kids are suffering. So it's not about that person's behavior. It's about everybody's behavior. So that very much falls in line with where our normal feedback was and the barriers until we started explaining ways to do it and to avoid extinction bursts. And so it doesn't affect everybody and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, you think about too, like the outcomes of the class performance reflects on the teacher's own job, like how well are you doing as a teacher is kind of judged essentially, like that metric is weighed against, among other things, classroom performance. And if one behavior is just disruptive enough to affect the performance of other kids in that classroom, I can see how, I feel like so often I kept thinking while I was writing this of all the, or reading this, I mean, like all the times I've been in those meetings with other BCBAs, like the teacher just they won't do it. Like this will work and they just won't do it. And like putting it in this framework, in this context is really interesting. Like, hey, if I can just get this kid to be quieter, even like 20% more of the time than what they've been, that would help the whole class significantly. You know what I mean? It is kind of like a reframing of kind of like oh man, they just won't do it. They don't have, I didn't get any buy-in or anything like that. It's like, no, they want something that's going to work and work a little quicker than what you were anticipating.
Yeah. And they might do a better job. Then maybe I certainly have in the past as a consultant in understanding, or recognizing the duty that they might have to, all the other students in the class. If you're hired to come in and support a student, of course you have, an obligation to help and support them and maybe are less attuned to the needs of the other students for various reasons. And teachers are certainly more, better positioned for those types of considerations. And they have all the other contacts, whether it be social, political, or whatever it is, with all these students that they also have to play around with too.
Yeah, I think it's a good reminder to. I know we always talk about don't blame the rat here, but it is that. Sure, seclusionary practices in schools historically has been quite horrible. Like, oh, there's a timeout room, it's safe, put them there. But when you have all the other students to think about, the reinforcing value isn't just to be out of the situation, not deal with that person, but it's also now I can perform better for everybody else. And so it's easy to see that immediate escape and why that would be chosen, not just because of not having to deal with the problematic behavior, but also for those other contingencies as well.
Yeah.
Performance of the other kids. Yeah. You also assess the demographic information. I want to talk about that real quick too. Just were there any correlations between, like region or educational experience, license, anything like that? And those discount curves?
Yeah, it's funny because the demographics, in my mind, it didn't seem to matter as much, though. I think it was this one, not study 2. It was like the South, somewhere in the South, that there were different patterns of discounting than elsewhere. Whether those are cultural perspectives or variables or a matter of sampling error, who knows? It could be very well be sampling error. The but an interesting thing though, because you think about factors that could affect decision making, and you look at maybe, let's say, the third level of selection. We look back at our good old friend Skinner, 1981, and cultural contingencies matter. And so if there's something to be found or identified, through these kinds of analyses, and that can be further explored, I'm all for it. So we had a large enough sample where we were able to ask those types of questions. It's sort of a new process for me, because I've traditionally been like a single case researcher. I haven't been a larger end kind of guy, and so this is where the voodoo statistics and brain power of David Cox and also Chair Sarmiento were really helpful, helping to run these numbers out and do the analyses.
You'll notice I glaze over the stats part of this of this paper, because it gets into a lot of math there. But experiment 2, so let's talk about that one. Who kind of did the same thing, but this time in the questionnaires assessed mild aggression versus more severe aggression. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we basically, here now we're using just the treatment choice questionnaire with participants.
Okay.
But we're interested in, the comparison is, given a scenario that talks about sort of mild challenging behavior, do you discount outcomes differently than given a scenario that describes severe challenging behavior? So the hypothesis that at least we had was, you're going to want to see the more severe challenging behavior decrease more quickly, and you're not going to be willing to wait as long, given the whole host of issues or problems that might arise with throwing a chair through a window versus just like talking out or being disruptive or whatever the day-to-day stuff that Steve might be doing in his office. So the I don't know if I'm allowed to insult the doctor, but I'm making a friendly jab. Of course, Steve
absolutely, but
any disruptive behavior.
Well, I'm alone in my home office, and so it doesn't do me any good. It's not reinforced, except for the aggression reinforces the actual view of the destruction of property. So I wait and save it up till I'm around the others, and then start throwing things wildly.
That's awesome. It's good. That's how it's socially mediated.
Yeah.
And so, but it turned out that there was a difference. You did have a steeper discounting rate with the severe challenging behaviors. Our participants preferred more immediate outcomes in that regard. but it wasn't something that was statistically significant. So,
okay,
which was kind of a surprise to me.
yeah,
And I thought we would see more of a marked difference. And so, the question then becomes: is that a function of severity, or is it a function of an artifact of our methodology, to where we didn't write it in such a way to where the differences were salient enough? So those are some sort of interesting questions, that could potentially be limitations.
because it implies that regardless of the severity, teachers still prefer a quicker reduction, even if it's not as much as what it would be if they stuck with a behavior plan for a longer period of time, right?
Right. Yeah.
Huh.
So I would, if I were to go back and do more of this work, and hope to do that, is that maybe make do sort of additional scenario comparisons to see if there was a language or wording that would maybe make behavior sensitive, or
Gotcha.
maybe you have a video that shows the piece, because you can say what it is, but then you're relying on the participant's learning history, right, to sort of interpret what it is that you're saying. Where I wonder, with more context, if that might change, because my guess is teachers know what the behavior looks like, hopefully, right, when they're trying to solve the problem.
Yeah, I wonder, and this reminds me of a conversation I had with Kyle yesterday, hearing about, I was dealing with a really challenging behavior situation. The person was like hitting walls. And like,
right.
we deal with homicidal, suicidal, sexual deviant consumers on a regular basis. To us, it's like, they're just hitting a wall. Great. Let's go in there. And, you wonder if they even, in the context of what they've dealt with in their career, kind of even maybe understand, or if there's other contingencies involved, like, hey, if it's that bad, they're just not in this classroom anymore. You know what I mean? And so I just wonder if some of the verbal behavior might affect that as well, because I agree. I would have thought the more extreme it is, the more I'm willing to do to try to stop it.
Right. Because I think, Steve, you have a much longer history and have seen, I guess, objectively say, way worse behavior than I have, and I've seen some pretty rough stuff. But I think that we're right on the so we're outliers in that regard, right? Most kids aren't trying to gouge their eyes out in public ed. Most kids aren't slamming their head against the corner of a concrete wall, and you can hear it, 3-4 doors down. But you and I, we all know what that's like, unfortunately.
I picture that there's one kid in school that would be out in the playground, and all of a sudden you'd see him take off, and then the principal would be taking off after him, as none of the teachers wanted to deal with it. And I have this stark memory of this. The principal at the time was a real big guy, and he has got this kid by the arm, just carrying him back onto campus as the kid is kicking him as hard as he could. And like, at that time, I'm like, I have never seen anybody act out like that in my life.
Yeah.
Compared to like what we see frequently now, it's like, that was bad, but it wouldn't be shocking to me nowadays.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Runners are tough. And when I was working out west, there was I remember a case where the kid would run out of the school and into people's homes, and really enjoyed the ride in the police car that they would get afterwards. And I chased this kid out one time, and I was wearing dress shoes because I was dealing with, I don't know, a training earlier in the day. And I remember getting some choice words from the assistant principal the next day because I had upset the janitor. Because I made these like black marks with my shoes on the floor, and I was like,
so luckily my elementary school was in the middle of nowhere. Like, you had to go a mile to find a house. They just bought some farmland up and set it up. But remember, one of the first, I was still a PhD student at the time, consulting for this case. We were doing quite well in the home, but things are not going well at school. So I go in to work with the school, and this person sees me. I'll say it was a female consumer, sees me and immediately thinks I'm there because you're in trouble, sort of situation. When really I'm just trying to get them to no longer have alternatives to the timeout room, because I didn't want her to be in that timeout room anymore. Strips naked and elopes. And there we are. They're like, we can't touch this person. I'm like, well, I can't like put my hand. So I'm there like back to her, trying to jump in front of her while she's running towards a road while her undressed body is running into me. I'm like, this is real rough for this early in my career. I need some help, please.
Yeah.
Your dream is someone else's nightmare.
How do you see, I mean, going forward, kind of getting back to the paper, like, is this something that you see, there's a lot of questions still to be asked, and you can maybe go into those too, but as a behavior analyst, just, like in the field, working in a school, is this like information, how do I use this information practically? Like if I have this idea that, hey, potentially, we've got some empirical evidence that teachers might value shorter term results, even if it's not the kind of results that I want to see. How does a BCBA going into these situations like use this information?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing, I would be really excited if I just like to hear about more cases where people are considering these kinds of things, like the late outcome, and we can even talk about probability of treatment success as another thing too that you could also look at, from the sort of probability perspective too, where value of a reward decreases as probability to happening or occurring decreases as well. But I think that you could sort of start that when trying to figure out what kind of intervention that you might implement or recommend is trying to understand what a teacher might need when it comes to immediacy of effect. And so, do you have any room for delay, or do you need something to change right now? The answer is probably going to be right now. And so I think that's one thing to consider. The second being, that might mean that maybe you have to go with your second choice intervention, and then maybe it might result in some sort of immediate change that then you could go and maybe fiddle and work with that would get it the rest of the way down. Because I think that the teacher is probably going to be looking for some sort of marked difference in behavior sooner than later, as I think that this would suggest. And so it's to me, sometimes maybe it's newer consultants or behavior analysts have a tendency to sort of like want to go with like the most effective thing that's going to work, and like we all want to do that, but this is about as much about social validity and buy-in as it is anything else. And so if someone's going to do something that's going to be with strong fidelity, but it's going to be 70 or 80% effective, but you're still going to have wiggle room to get it down the rest of the way, to me that's a win, and it's much better than, hey, I tried this for a week, I didn't get anywhere, and then I abandoned it entirely, and I don't want any of your suggestions anymore. Right?
Yeah. We can do that. And we can do that ethically too. Like it's not, like you said, the social validity aspect. Like, it might not be tackling everything that we, does need address. But one, it can be done with some fidelity versus nothing at all. And two, it's valuable to the teachers. Yeah, I appreciate that perspective, because sometimes it can be a little defeating when you're like celebrating the small wins, even though you're like, man, this kid's capable of so much more. You have to paint that perspective of like, it's probably not feasible to do everything that you want to do.
Yeah, I usually think of it in terms of the reason we have preventative measures and proactive measures. You have the thing that you're trying to prevent the target behavior from occurring, but teaching the new skill, imparting the new contingencies for an appropriate replacement behavior, that sort of thing, that's going to take more time. And you can't just prevent it and then think you're good, because those contingencies are going to come back into place and then it'll just come roaring back. But you can prevent it and then slowly reintroduce it, hopefully at a decreased intensity, and then address the behavior and actually shape it, rather than just preventing the opportunity for it to occur, sort of thing. And that seems to be helpful in bridging that gap somewhat to like, no, I can't deal with this the intensity day in and day out. When you've prevented it, now they're like, oh, you've cured it. Like, no, we've just gotten started at this point. Now we do the real work and teach some new, appropriate behavior to hopefully replace that and still get that reinforcing outcome.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, cool. We're winding up on our hour here. Any other cool things you're working on? Anything that you're excited about right now?
Oh gosh.
We'll talk Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, well, I will say, I mean, one of the things that I'm really grateful to be doing as of late is playing a lot of Commander and with Magic the Gathering. And I have I played a lot of Magic in grad school. And it wasn't until like 2022 when I kind of got back into it, and a buddy of mine who's a faculty member here at MSU in educational technology, he was like, let's play some Commander, man. I had no idea what it was because it hadn't come out yet, and it's been a really fun thing. I just I really enjoyed the Avatar release, and I really
nice. I haven't done that one yet.
Yeah, they're fun, and there were some really cool shrine enchantments in there, and I got so into that actually I just finished participating in a research study on college teaching where I was a participant in that, and so I got $50, and so I bought a whole bunch of other shrines online so I could compile like this big shrine commander deck. It's gonna be so much fun. Super excited about it.
I love this so much. I love hearing about this, and I love talking about either Magic or D&D because Steve just glazes over, and it's my chance to shine. And this is really reinforcing right now.
With D&D, it hasn't been something that I had done, and I was sort of sick for a couple of days over the winter vacation, and I spent all this time in bed, like learning how to DM and be a dungeon master. And I created these sort of like basic or like pared down campaigns for my wife and my 6 and my 8-year-old, and they all center around like the dog has been like cursed or is like lost. We have to go save the dog. and it's been so much fun, like, because the kids are like, we need grappling hooks, and then like next campaign there's grappling hooks in a chest, and it's been a great thing to share with the kids.
See, I can see it being good for building creativity in children, but I don't have that creativity, so every time Kyle brings this up, I'm always like, there's this new fangled technology called video games where someone does all that background work for you and you just get to experience it. You know what I mean?
Like, the thinking man's video game is what that is.
Yeah. It's cool. I'm a little behind on it, and I'm still, like, as of the taping of this, I'm only halfway through season 3 of Stranger Things too. So like, I can be a little late to the party, but I say better late than never.
So with things like that, it's actually nice because now you don't have to have had waited all this time for the last season to come out. Like Game of Thrones, I didn't start watching until the last season came out, so I was no longer disappointed like everybody else was of having to wait that long for what happened.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that series. Well, awesome. I could talk forever about this, but let's stay on track here. But we'll wrap things up, and then maybe when we're done recording, we'll get into I want to know more about the Avatar set. But Matt, thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Our guest, Matt Brodhead, associate professor at Michigan State University. Thanks again for being on Cooperant.
Thanks for having me, guys. Best of luck.